If you need a family-sized 5-seat MPV but don't necessarily want one, look straight to this car, the second-generation Citroen C4 Picasso. It's extravagantly designed and comes with some genuinely innovative features. The basics of space, safety and cost-effectiveness are all taken care of, but where this model really excels is in the other things: style, technology and a very emotive feel. It's a bit special. Picasso, the name that launched both a generation of art and several generations of small Citroen people carrier. The great Spaniard's family fell out with each other over the decision to grant this French car maker use of Senor Pablo's famous name. But it's certainly been worth the legal wrangling for Citroen, with over 3 million Picasso model sales since this car, the Zara Picasso, was launched in 1999. In 2007, that model was replaced by a far more modern successor, the C4 Picasso, a car that in 2013 was relaunched in the futuristic second-generation guise we're going to look at here. It's tempting to think of MPV people carriers as one of the most boring sectors of car design. Boxes on wheels, if you will, with little wit or verb to their execution. Here, things are very different. Yes, what we have here is a box with wheels at each corner, but as any kid at Christmas will tell you, not all boxes are created equal. It may have been created to go head-to-head with 5-seat MPV rivals such as the Ford C-Max and the Renault Scenic, but this Mark II C4 Picasso feels cut from rather different cloth. Emboldened by the success of their boutique DS line of cars, Citroen has decided to inject a measure of style and desirability into many of its other wares, and this design looks like something that's just driven off a motor show stand. But it's facing a difficult task. Today's people-carrying market is very different from the one Citroen started with at the turn of the century. Many buyers in this sector now demand more than 5 seats, and even those that don't may well feel that the latest generation of more practically orientated Focus-style family hatchbacks, Qashqai-like crossovers and small SUVs offer many MPV-like virtues. On top of that, Citroen these days has the only slightly smaller C3 Picasso Super Mini MPV to sell, a car that offers many of this one's virtues for a useful price saving. Hence the need here for a very clever piece of product design indeed, one that clearly speaks to family buyers who need practicality but don't want to sacrifice style. Which is how we've ended up with something so glassy and futuristic looking, a car that comes stuffed with high-tech gadgetry and fitted with a more up-to-date range of more efficient engines. Sounds appealing? Well, let's check it out. Climb aboard a C4 Picasso, and before you even set off, it's clear that this is going to be a somewhat different experience. There are no conventional instrument dials and nothing directly in front of you, with key driving information instead displayed on a giant centre screen in the centre of the dash. The first thing that'll probably grab your attention though is this, a windscreen that stretches up and almost over your head, offering a panoramic view not just of the road ahead, but also the sky above. The wishbone-shaped windscreen pillars have glazed centre sections to further boost visibility, and there's a low window line that not only makes manoeuvring easy, but should give children a better view out, and potentially stop them feeling sick. So, it's different to sit in then, but will it be so to drive? Let's find out. If you've opted for one of the semi-automatic Efficientronic gearboxes that are optionally offered to diesel buyers at mid-range EHDI AirDream level, the answer is definitely yes, though to begin with, not always for the right reasons. This is not a full auto, but a manual transmission without a clutch, which means that for smooth progress you have to momentarily lift off between changes made via the steering wheel mounted paddle shifters. Until you learn to do that, the car will seem jerky and unresponsive, but once you adjust, the system actually works very well and is certainly easier to use in the improved ETG6 form fitted to this second generation design. I can see, though, why many would be more comfortable with a more conventional 6-speed manual box, the one I have here. There's no conventional auto offered to C4 Picasso customers. Whatever transmission you choose, one thing remains constant: the silky smooth ride. Which is the thing I like most about this car. It may come as news to some motoring journalists, but most MPV buyers don't routinely want to throw their cars about as if they were on a stage from the RAC rally. What most of them would prefer is a model that rolls the red carpet over the average appallingly surfaced British road, as this one does. Nothing in this part of the market can approach the pillowy ride quality on offer here. But the trick, which Citroen hasn't always mastered, is to offer this without inducing the kind of body roll and handling woolliness that removes any element of enjoyment from the driving experience altogether. In this respect, it's certainly true that this impressively refined C4 Picasso is a useful step forward from its predecessor. A freshly developed EMP2, or Efficient Modular Platform, has shaved 140 kilograms off the curb weight, which has to help in making the car feel more agile. But it's still way off the sprightly standards of a rival Ford C-Max or even a Renault Scenic in terms of steering feel and body roll. And in true Citroen style, the brakes are very heavily servo-assisted, reacting to the merest brush on the pedal. Now, if you can ignore all of that, get familiar with the car, and even start to push it a little through the corners, you'll find that the anchors are reassuringly effective, the steering's actually quite accurate, and grip relatively plentiful. It's just getting to that point, something that you probably won't manage on a brief test drive. In other words, don't be put off by initial unfamiliarities of design and drive. After all, you probably wouldn't be looking at the Citroen in the first place if you didn't want something just that little bit different from the usual character-free, compact people-carrying experience. Just enjoy this car for what it is as you float over road imperfections, marvel at the unusually hushed levels of refinement, and enjoy the benefits of a commanding driving position that's a huge help at roundabouts or when parking. And with this panoramic screen, makes it seem like you're suddenly viewing the world in high definition. The engine choice is naturally weighted towards diesels because that's what Citroen does very well, and it's also what British customers want to buy. The 1.6-litre eHDI 115 brake horsepower variant I'm trying here is the big seller in the range, but you can save quite a bit by opting for the entry-level 90 brake horsepower 1.6-litre HDI model, which doesn't have the so-called Airdream eHDI efficiency tweaks, but isn't really much more expensive to run, or an awful lot slower. Rest to 62 miles an hour in the HDI 90 takes 12.9 seconds, and that's only around a second slower than what you'd manage in this pokier version. Both variants do, however, struggle a bit when powering on fully laden when the road starts to rise, as does the entry-level 120 brake horsepower 1.6-litre VTI petrol model that offers similar on-paper performance and marks the price starting point for the range. If you do want something with a little more mid-range pulling power, then you could go for the THP 155 petrol version that uses a Mini Cooper S 1.6-litre turbo engine that, not surprisingly, moves this car on rather swiftly, making 62 miles an hour in 9 seconds on the way to 130 miles an hour. For all the reasons I've already given you, though, I don't think such a performance package suits the character of this car. No, if funds permit, the optimum C4 Picasso engine is the one at the top of the lineup, the impressive blue HDI 150. Its performance figures are virtually identical to those of the THP petrol, yet it's got around 50% more pulling power and is around 50% more economical. Enough said. Only the French could build an MPV that looks this good, a responsibility they seem to take very seriously, for it's clear that a huge proportion of this vehicle's budget has been lavished on design, inside and out. So let's start with this futuristic front end, offering daytime running lights under a chrome strip where you'd expect the headlamps to be. They're further down, flanking the top corners of a trapezoidal air intake that sits below this lovely, softer looking Citroen logo that sits front and centre. Along the side of the car, a signature C-shaped trim in chrome adds personality to sculpted body panels that aim to put an end to the days of slab-sided MPVs, and are styled to disguise the fact that this second generation design is shorter and lower than its predecessor. Moving around to the back, you get an Audi Q5 style clamshell-like tailgate that's wide enough to house a full complement of rear lights that can be ordered with a distinctive 3D style illumination. And inside, well, the first thing your Citroen salesperson will show you is this panoramic windscreen. Push up this sun visor and your normal upward 28-degree angle of vision is increased to a massive 108 degrees. A better view out, in fact, than you'd get roofed down in a convertible where the windscreen rail is usually directly above your head. Now, practically, it means that you don't have to crane your neck up when, for example, you're first in the queue at the traffic lights. Subjectively, it does wonders in increasing the light, airy feel of the cabin. The extended glass section is progressively tinted so that the top of your head won't be. But if you really don't like it, you can pull the sun visor back down again to the point where the top of the roof would normally be. And that's just the start of the contemporary cleverness. Designer Frederick Subaru describes the interior as being inspired by contemporary loft-style living. Now, he clearly hasn't been in my loft, otherwise this interior would be decorated with old copies of Autocar and have the unmistakable smell of dead pigeon. But I can see what he's driving at. It's uncompromisingly modern, airy, and there are a few touches that are quite extravagantly designed, like the optional relaxed front passenger seat that lets the occupant raise, stretch and rest their legs. The days of Citroens feeling built down to a price with all the design flair of a buffet car cheese sandwich are thankfully consigned to the past. Compare this cabin to that of, say, a Zara Picasso, and you'd never believe they came from the same manufacturer. The dashboard is dominated by these twin screens. Most new cars have some sort of central infotainment screen these days, like this Citroen's tablet-style 7-inch display. But more unusual is this snazzily futuristic 12-inch panoramic HD panel up top, which replaces the normal set of conventional dialed instrument gauges. Unfortunately, this feature isn't standard on all models, but if you're buying this car, do try and stretch up to a trim level that has it, for this is one of the defining parts of this high-tech design. This top screen is primarily there to show a virtual speedometer, but it can also be configured to display all sorts of information, such as cruise control and speed limiter settings. Now, you can also change the display of the dials from round to square, although I'm not quite sure why you'd want to. More useful is the option of changing the screen's overall theme and uploading a personal photograph from a USB stick as a backdrop. Here, I've got a relaxing coastal scene. Lovely. I'm not quite so sure about the infotainment screen, though at least it's standard across the range. As well as managing sat-nav, sounds and Bluetooth phone functions, it also aims to reduce dashboard button clutter by replacing a conventional set of ventilation and air conditioning controls. Now, while this sounds like a great idea in principle, it can be a bit annoying when, say, you're driving along with the sat-nav showing and you need to take your eyes off the road and shuttle through the menus just to change the temperature, stabbing away at the touch screen to try and get a response. It's also annoying when you start the car up and you simply want to turn up the fan to get some heat in the cabin, and you have to wait for the system to load up. Call me a Luddite, but I think I'd rather go back to conventional ventilation controls here. There's more to the cabin than just those screens, though. You'll need a bit of time to get used to the steering wheel, which, somewhat ironically, given the clean, open feel of the dash, is festooned with buttons. Still, it's beautifully made with a polished metal trim and stitched leather finish that's symptomatic of build quality leagues better than the previous C4 Picasso, thanks to some lovely soft touch materials used on the dash, as well as glossy blacks, sparkle effect finishes and proper satin chrome inlays. Yes, if you hunt around the nether reaches of the fascia, you'll come across some cheaper plastics, but then that's a cost-cutting trick that you'll even find Audi and BMW pulling. But enough about the look and feel. Most buyers choose an MPV because of its practicality. How does the C4 Picasso rate here? Let's start with the oddment space to house the paraphernalia of everyday life. Now this is generally good, though there's a passenger side glove box with an inordinately large lid concealing a cavity behind so small that it's barely worth covering up. Much better are the drawers that you'll find under the front seats and the huge storage bin at the base of the centre console, which includes a jack and a USB port. And equally large is the stowage box that's mounted between the front seats and is removable on Efficientronic semi-automatic models. Finally, I'll mention what, as a parent, would be my favourite feature, this rear-facing conversation mirror, there to give an unimpeded view of which child has just stuffed its sticky sweet into your 12-volt power socket. So, how will those children fare once they're installed rearwards and ready to plug their gaming equipment into one of those 3 12-volt sockets scattered around the car? Well, pull open rear doors that now open wider to a 65-degree angle for excellent access, and it looks pretty spacious, which might come a little contrary to expectations, given that this second generation C4 Picasso is fully 40mm shorter than its predecessor in overall length and sits the same amount lower to the ground. That'd be a problem for the passenger compartment were it not for the cleverness of the latest efficient modular platform this Mark II model sits upon, which facilitates a 60mm wheelbase increase despite the more compact dimensions. As a result, there's actually 20mm more legroom than before, and standards of head, elbow and shoulder room that are almost identical. Comfort you can properly appreciate thanks to a proper seating arrangement. Unlike many people carriers, this one doesn't position the unfortunate middle rear passenger with legs astride a central transmission tunnel and perched on some hard and narrow piece of bulging foam. Instead, there's a completely flat floor and a rear cabin seating area made up of 3 separate, identically sized chairs that can be slid backwards and forwards independently of one another, and in the same way reclined or even folded flat. The fold flat option's a useful one because it means that this centre seat can function as a table when not in use. And talking of tables, most models have aircraft style fold out ones built into the front seat backs, which can be illuminated by neat LED lights. Want it all to feel a little more airy? Of course, there's a huge optional panoramic glass roof that ups the combined glazed area to a greenhouse-like 5.3 square metres. Want more privacy? No problem. Most models have integrated retractable rear side window sunblinds, and you can specify dark tinted rear windows. Everything I've said so far applies not only to this C4 Picasso, but also to its 7-seat stablemate, the Grand C4 Picasso, which uses its extra 169mm of length to house the third row seating that larger families will want, and a bit of extra boot space. Oh yes, I was getting to that. Now, no doubt it was a great design idea, building all the rear lights into the tailgate rather than, as would be more normal, splitting them between the hatch and the corners of the car. The downside of that approach is that it makes this thing very heavy, which would be enough to make the electrically operated tailgate option a must-have feature if it wasn't so tediously slow to operate. The old version of this car had a boot that wasn't a lot bigger than that of Citroen's smallest MPV, the C3 Picasso. Thanks to a 37-litre size increase, this one, though, enables buyers to much more easily justify the stretch up to this bigger, more expensive car. The 537 litres you get is enough to comprehensively trounce the competition, 66 litres more than a C-Max and a massive 100 litres more than a Renault Scenic. Plus, you can extend this space to as much as 630 litres if you push the rear chairs right forward, which is as much as the boot compartment of the 7-seater Grand C4 Picasso model. Now, fold the rear seats flat and you've a 1,851 litre cargo area to play with. And if you've really big items to fit in, most models provide a fold-flat front passenger seat so that you can carry objects of up to 2.5 metres long. C4 Picasso prices have risen over those of the previous generation model, but only by a few £100s. That means a span of between £17,500 and just over £25,000, making this car around £3,500 more than the brand's smaller C3 Picasso MPV. But the major decision C4 Picasso buyers are going to have to make is whether to choose this car or find a model-for-model premium of about £1,700 to graduate up to its 7-seat Grand C4 Picasso stablemate. Assuming that you stay with this 5-seater, you're probably going to be deciding between 3 levels of ownership. If you need the asking price to come in at well below £20,000, you're going to be shopping at the bottom of the range and either choosing between the low-tech 1.6-litre VTI petrol unit or, more likely, finding the extra £700 necessary to graduate up to the 90 brake horsepower 1.6-litre HDI diesel. If you can stretch to the £20,000 price point, then you'll be entitled to select from a range of frugal models using Citroen's e-HDI AirDream diesel technology and offering the option of the brand's latest efficient ET G6 semi-automatic gearbox. Finally, if you can squeeze your budget just a little further than that, you'll find yourself looking at the most powerful engines at the top of the range, where there's a choice between the 155 brake horsepower 1.6-litre petrol turbo THP model or the preferable charms of the French brand's latest 150 brake horsepower blue HDI diesel unit. So, having talked you through the range, let's talk you through the value proposition that it offers. Now, of course, if you're looking at compact 5-seat family motoring that offers you extra luggage space and versatility, an MPV like this one isn't the only way you could go. A similar kind of budget would get you a small estate based on a Focus-sized family hatchback. Or, if you want to make a bit more of a statement, a compact crossover like Nissan's Qashqai or Peugeot's 3008. But let's assume that it is a compact 5-seat MPV that you actually want, and not one based on a super mini like Ford's B-Max or Citroen's own C3 Picasso, but something decently sized that, if necessary, could function as your family's only means of transport. What else is there to directly rival this car? Not that much is the answer, if truth be told. The rival that most closely mirrors what's on offer here is probably Ford's C-Max, a car with an efficient 1-litre EcoBoost petrol engine to tempt buyers shopping at the very foot of the range, prepared to find a few £100s over the cost of a base petrol C4 Picasso. Move on to the more powerful models though, and the Ford, though slightly cheaper, can't match either this Citroen's efficiency or its style. The other key rival is Renault's Scenic, but in terms of the volume petrol or diesel models, you're looking at a premium of between £1,000 and £1,500 to own one of those over an equivalent C4 Picasso. And the Renault has a smaller boot. Are there other options? A few, but to be honest, there are issues with all of them. If you're looking at a base petrol C4 Picasso, the same kind of money would buy you a 5-seat 1.6-litre Toyota Verso. And if you're looking at a base diesel version of this Citroen, the same cash would get you a Seat Altea 1.6 TDI. But in both cases, you're looking at older, less appealing products with significantly less boot space. More modern options that target the same kind of market that we're discussing here include Fiat's 500L, smaller and not that much cheaper, and Mercedes B-Class, far pricier and not that much bigger. You can see then that however you cut it, this car looks a strong prospect for the right kind of buyer. So if you are that person, what can you expect to find included within the standard equipment tally? Well, quite a lot actually. It's a pity that the very base trim level does without some of the practical touches. So at the rear it deletes underfloor storage compartments and seat back trays, while at the front you miss the underseat drawers and the fold flat passenger seat. Still, all these features are of course fitted elsewhere in the range. And all models do get the clever panoramic windscreen and the smart 16-inch alloy wheels. Then there's dual zone air conditioning with pollen filters, a stitched leather steering wheel, Bluetooth for your phone, a hill holder clutch to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions, cruise control with a speed limiter, and the 7-inch touchscreen infotainment system, from which you control a 6-speaker stereo system with steering wheel controls and aux-in and USB compatibility. Unfortunately, you have to stretch to a top trim level to get the 12-inch panoramic HD colour central display that for me is really a key part of the interior's futuristic appeal. But if you can stretch that far and get yourself a car like the one I have here, then other nice touches include a reverse parking camera, front fog lights that turn with the corners, rear side window blinds, a removable rechargeable boot light torch, and my favourite touch, a rear seat conversation mirror that helps you keep a better eye on the kids in the back. And key options you might like to look at? Well, there are 4 main ones I'd bring to your attention. A park assist system can manoeuvre you automatically into tight spaces you'll be even better placed to negotiate if you've also got the 360-degree vision setup that uses 4 cameras that, through the larger of the 2 display screens, the 12-inch one, offer you views from above, the rear, or a panoramic front view. And talking of screens, if you want to get the most from the other one, the 7-inch display in the centre of the dash, you'll want to specify what's called Multi-City Connect, a portal of connected applications, all controlled from this touchpad. Now, with this installed, you can find the nearest service station and a nice hotel or restaurant, or get weather updates or traffic information. Finally, there are a range of lovely seat options, a massaging function for the front seats, lovely soft winged relax headrests all round, and best of all, a relax front passenger seat that lets the occupant raise, stretch and rest their legs. I've tried it and it's like travelling first class in a 747. Add the huge panoramic dark tinted glass roof with its electric sliding blind and I think I'd be perfectly set to travel anywhere. Lovely. That only leaves safety, which of course is well up to the mark. As you'd expect, there are twin front, side and curtain airbags, plus Isofix child seat fastenings on all 3 rear seats. To try and keep these things from ever being necessary, there are the usual electronic assistance features, including traction and stability control, plus ABS brakes with brake assist for emergency stops. And there are Mercedes-style seat belts that pull back automatically when you buckle up to optimise protection. It all accounts for a 5-star Euro NCAP safety rating and an 89% score in the testing programme's child occupant category. If you want to go further than that and don't mind spending a little more on the options list, there's a blind spot monitoring system that stops you dangerously pulling out to overtake, and a lane departure warning system which aims to stop dozy drivers from veering out of their lanes on the highway by using a vibrating mechanism that buzzes the seatbelt against you when your wheels stray over the lane delineating lines without you indicating. It's rather irritating actually, but maybe that's just the point. Other optional safety features include radar-guided active cruise control that'll keep you a safe distance from the car in front on the highway, but is fiddly to activate, setup requiring use of the steering wheel buttons, manipulation of the infotainment touchscreen, and attention on the top digital display. Much simpler to activate are the auto headlights. You can specify that dip themselves in the face of oncoming traffic at night. As I touched upon earlier, on-the-limit handling won't be a priority for MPV buyers, but three other issues most certainly are: practicality, safety, and cost of ownership. The first areas are well covered by this car, but does it stack up on the balance sheet? Citroen has gone back to basics to ensure that it does. The modern EMP2 chassis this model now sits upon is 140 kilograms lighter than its predecessor, so that's the weight of an adult and a teenager taken straight off the scales, and enough to make a tremendous difference. This car's actually now a little lighter than the brand's much smaller C3 Picasso, lighter too than a typical family hatch like Ford's Focus, a car with nowhere near this Citroen's carrying capacity. The weight loss plan isn't the only angle of attack the French company has taken. There are low-friction drivetrains, improved aerodynamics, and stop-and-start technology that cuts the engine when you don't need it, stopped at the lights or stuck in traffic. It's all resulted in carbon dioxide emission returns that are typically 30 grams per kilometre less on average than the previous generation model. That's a significant amount in terms of the tax that you pay, whether you're a private customer or simply a company car buyer who needs a bit more space. Indeed, at launch, this was the first conventionally powered compact MPV to get below the important 100 grams per kilometre figure for CO2 emissions. You'll need all the technology Citroen can muster to manage this, and the smallest of the e-HDI diesel engines, which means the e-HDI 90 Airdream variant mated to the ETG6 semi-automatic gearbox, in which form this car can manage 98 grams per kilometre of CO2 and record a combined cycle fuel figure of 74.3 miles to the gallon. Personally, I'd prefer the conventional manual gearbox and slightly pokier feel of the e-HDI 115 Airdream variant that I'm driving here, a car which is nearly as efficient, managing 105 grams per kilometre and 70.6 miles to the gallon. That's quite remarkable for a vehicle of this size. Also impressive is the 150 brake horsepower blue HDI diesel, my favourite C4 Picasso variant, offering as it does a very strong turn of speed, yet 67.3 miles to the gallon and 110 grams per kilometre of CO2. That's thanks to a clever selective catalytic reduction module, there to treat nitrogen oxide and limit carbon dioxide output. Petrol customers don't do so badly either. Being the oldest engine in the range, the entry-level 1.6 VTI 120 unit is also the dirtiest, putting out 145 grams per kilometre of CO2. Still, it delivers a respectable 44.8 miles from a green pump gallon. A fraction behind the 47.1 miles to the gallon you'll get from the punchy 155 PS THP petrol turbocharged model, which returns 139 grams per kilometre of CO2. As to what all that will mean in terms of overall running costs, well, you can expect a variant like the volume 1.6 eHDI 115 Airdream diesel model that I'm driving here to cost you about 5 pence per mile less than a comparable Ford Focus to run over a typical 3-year, 36,000 mile ownership period. Ongoing costs that'll be further aided by the option of an affordable 3-year servicing plan. Maintenance costs, in fact, are usefully reduced over the old model thanks to some thoughtful engineering tweaks. Suspension changes claim to have increased tyre life by 20%, while redesigned brakes aim to preserve your pads for 40% longer. What else? Well, there are improved residual values that, at the end of your ownership term, should see this car still be worth about 40% of what you originally paid for it. And there are reasonable insurance groupings ranging between 14 and 22. Finally, there's the usual 3-year, 60,000 mile warranty. Not every family needs 7 seats in an MPV. And for those that don't, this C4 Picasso offers a smartly styled, high-tech equipped and very practical alternative. Though not especially enjoyable to push hard, that's because it's aimed precisely where it should be targeted, at mums and dads rather than driving enthusiasts, with impressive long-distance comfort you'll also appreciate on the school run, day in, day out. So much was true of this car's predecessor, but this second generation model goes a lot further, offering perfect proof that a people carrier can do more than just provide comfortable, efficient transport. It can be, well, what Citroens once were: clever, futuristic, expressively designed, cars you'd be genuinely proud to own. I think you'd feel like that if you needed a model of this kind and this were on your driveway. True, it's a pity that you have to stretch to an up-spec trim level for all the features that show this car at its best, but if you can do that and tick all the right boxes, you'll get an MPV that really seems to have been created with a bit of love. From the panoramic windscreen to the lounge-style massaging passenger seat, from the widescreen HD instrument display to the fact that you can sit and Facebook your friends on the touchscreen, it's a car that's a joy to operate. And for me, a joy to look at, as different and refreshing in design as it will be to own. In short, the Citroen we used to know is back. The manufacturer that took risks, created magic and bought us cars that sat apart from the ordinary norm. Cars exactly like this one.